All right. Well, people are starting to trickle in, which is great. Well, I'll give a little introduction, kind of give people a few moments to log in, and they'll catch us as we're going about here. So I want to welcome everyone to tonight's presentation, a webinar called Living with Black Bears. My name is Lauren Bohr, and I'm the Education Coordinator for Public and Youth Programs here at Mohonk Preserve. I'm going to be monitoring and facilitating this presentation this evening. You're welcome to use the chat. You can directly chat me or the group if you're having any issues. You probably also have my email, and I also have that open, so I'm monitoring that if you're having any issues as well. So before I introduce our presenter, Jonathan Russell, I have a few reminders for everyone as you're attending. If you do have questions, we do have the chat box, so you're welcome to put a question in there. There's also a Q&A section, and you're welcome to put a question in there. I will be monitoring these throughout the presentation. At the end of our presentation, we'll open it up for questions. So I'll refer back to the chat and to the Q&A section. There's also the opportunity for you to speak. It's that little hand that you see there and it says speak. If you click on that, I can do the little accept and you'll have your video and you can actually be right here and speak if you're not as comfortable chatting in the chat box or typing in things. So you can do that as well. And I'll just ask that you hold off on doing that until the end of the presentation. But anytime during the presentation, a question pops up in your head, you can put it in the Q&A section or the chat. So this presentation is going to be recorded. Well, it can be put out on the internet. We're going to have it on our website and our YouTube channel. For those of you that may have come in late, I'm going to send it out to everyone who's registered. So the link will be sent out to everyone who's registered, and we will be sharing this online. So let me introduce our speaker for this evening. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce our presenter, Jonathan Russell. Jonathan is a New York State Department of Environmental Conservation Regional Bear Biologist. It's a nice long title, covering the mid and lower Hudson Valley and the southern Catskill Mountains. Originally, he's from Dutchess County. He received a bachelor's degree from SUNY Cobleskill in wildlife management and worked with the National Park Service, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and Alaska Fish and Game before accepting a position with the DEC and returning home to the Hudson Valley. He's spent a majority of his 14-year career with the DEC focusing on management of big game species and resolving human-wildlife conflicts. So it's got a lot of great background in the topic of bears and large game. So without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Jonathan. And again, if you have questions or anything, please do use the chat. I'll be monitoring it. All right.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Laura. And sorry, the lights, I guess, went on the building at 6 o'clock, so it's a little dark in here. Let me just share the screen here. Bear with me one moment. Okay. Yep. Thank you again, Lauren. So, like she said, I'm the regional bear biologist, as a former deer biologist for DEC Region 3. And Region 3 encompasses Dutchess County, Putnam County, and Westchester County on the east side of the Hudson, and Ulster County, Sullivan, Orange, down to Rockland on the west side. Some people wouldn't think it, but we have a lot of bears in our region and a lot of people. We also have a wide diversity of habitat where bears can sometimes get themselves into trouble. We have large agricultural areas, more like rural areas with a lot of outdoor recreation, camping, hiking. We also have some really densely populated areas where just a few bears can generate a lot of concern by the public. So today we're just going to do a quick review on some bear biology, discuss the status of New York's black bear population, and then talk some about human bear interactions, which is what I spend the majority of my time on. So we have three types of bears in North America: brown bears, polar bears, neither of which are in New York, and the one we're more familiar with, the black bear. Black bear is the only species of bear found east of the Mississippi River, and they're also only found in North America. So on to some black bear biology. Typically, adult bears stand, or when they're standing, between 2.5 and 3 feet tall at the shoulder, with adult females averaging about 165 pounds and adult males averaging 300 pounds. Though the largest black bear recorded in New York was about 750 pounds. Cubs are born at less than a pound, and they're born in the dens. We'll cover that more later as well. Female home ranges are somewhere around 10 square miles, whereas males have a much larger home range of approximately 100 square miles. That being said, home range size in New York can vary significantly based on food availability and cover, other resources. Some bears in Western New York that occupy areas with more open habitat may use larger areas than others. Sorry. We can also tell a lot when we look at the skeletal structure of an animal. When we think of bears, often we think of those large, impressive canine teeth, which are certainly are impressive. But more importantly, those flattened molars in the rear portion of the jaw are used to grind vegetation, and that's how bears get the majority of their calories. You can also note the large nasal cavity. Bears have an excellent sense of smell, far superior to ours. So females breed every other year in June through July. That's when the majority of breeding occurs, but certainly the early ones or late ones. Cubs are usually born in January or February, while the mother's still in the den. Litter sizes of 1 to 6 are possible, but in New York we usually see litter sizes of 2 to 3. So we are getting more and more reports of 4. Cubs will stay with the sow through that first summer and actually den with her. And the next summer, when the female becomes receptive, she usually chases those cubs off. So they're with her for 1.5 years. Bears also have a kind of unique 2-step pregnancy process. During step 1, which is mating, eggs are fertilized, but they don't implant or begin further development. Several months later, development begins when the fertilized egg finally implants. This process is called delayed implantation. Oops. Sorry. And the reason for that is, sorry, I lost my mouse. The reason for that is if the bear becomes injured or there's a poor food year, those eggs may not implant and develop, so that she has a better chance of making it through the winter. Just a quick note on cubs, since we touched on that briefly. Female bears will often leave their cubs either to forage as they get older, or if they sense danger when they're younger, they'll often leave them near a tree or put them up a tree, and then come back later on when, usually after dark, when the danger is gone. Some people will encounter young bears, cubs, and think they're abandoned, but that's pretty typical for a female to leave cubs for some decent periods of time. If you did encounter one in that situation, the best thing to really do is just leave it alone, don't touch it, and certainly don't feed it. And if you're concerned that it really is abandoned, say like it's there the next day, please contact our office, and I'll have my contact information in the presentation. So bears are not true hibernators. Woodchucks, bats, chipmunks, they all enter a state close to suspended animation, where body temperatures fall close to freezing and metabolism slows almost to a halt. Bears, their temperature only drops about 12 degrees. It's basically like they're in a deep sleep where they can awaken pretty readily. They also don't use the bathroom at all while they're denned. Bear dens are surprisingly clean and odor-free. So more often than actually seeing a bear itself, you might see sign left by a bear. Bear tracks are unique because of their size and toe pattern. You can see in the upper left there. Black bears walk flat-footed, otherwise referred to as plantigrade locomotion, opposed to a deer or a dog. While not normally associated with speed, black bears can run as fast as 35 miles an hour for short intervals. Black bear droppings, the bottom left there, you see are pretty distinctive in both their size and in quantity. Compared to other mammals, they have relatively short digestive tracts, and food passes through fairly rapidly. You may also see what I call like nests, such as this, and that's resulting from treetop foraging. In our area, you'll see it a lot of times in September, maybe into early October, in cherries. If there's a good cherry crop, bears will spend days up there eating. They'll build these and even sleep up there. You also see it in beech trees in a good mast year as well. Bears will also mark telephone poles for territorial markings, other objects, even human structures sometimes. I have actually a telephone pole down the road from my house that bears mark. And if you ever like encounter this, you're not sure if it's, say, woodpecker damage or bears. A lot of times you can take a closer look, you can see your claw marks, or even some hair stuck into the rough portion. So the bulk of a black bear's diet is made up of vegetation. In New York, there's approximately 80 species of plants that they're known to consume. During the fall, bears' appetites are biologically programmed to increase so they can store as much fat for the winter as possible. This is called hyperphagia. During the fall, they must consume 10 times as many calories as they need during the spring and summer. And for a lot of bears, that means finding 20,000 calories a day or more. Insects are also a highly preferred food source when they are available. A lot of times you'll see flipped over rocks, logs, old rotten logs that are torn up. So now we'll move on to what New York State's bear population is, or what it was, what it is, and what it might be in the future. So this is like what our bear population looked like in the 1950s. And you see those darker gray areas And those are really where the breeding bears were. In those later Gray counties, they may have observed transient bears, but real viable bear populations were isolated to those more remote areas. Now, prior to European settlement, black bears were likely widely and abundant throughout New York. But by the late 1800s, due to extensive forest clearing for agriculture and unregulated killing of bears, populations were driven to low levels and, like I said, restricted to those more inaccessible mountainous areas of the state. In the early 1900s, bears were granted legal protection as a game animal, and regulations on hunting allowed for population growth. During the same period, many people resettled from rural areas on small family farms to more urban or suburban areas. And this abandoned farmland reverted back to forests. So you can see even in the 50s, that legacy of land use still kept those bears in those areas. So this is where we are now, and you can see, especially in the last few decades, that population is expanding significantly. So given the speed that population expanded, it's likely that's going to continue to expand as our habitat is available for them. At this point, it really shouldn't be surprising to see a bear passing through any town in New York, north of the city. So everybody always asks about how many bears do we have in New York or our area. So I'll stress these are minimum population estimates, but we have between 6,000 and 8,000 bears in the state, and like 1,800 to 2,600 in our area, which is the southeastern region of the state. So with that increasing bear population, some good things and some bad things maybe come along with it. The incidences of negative human-bear interactions have gone up significantly in the last few years, or last few decades, I should say. Residential, commercial, and agricultural damage, and the amount of staff time that DEC puts towards dealing with these issues. But some of the benefits are bear viewing opportunities for people, bear hunting opportunities, appreciation for a viable bear population in New York. We've done some surveys, and one of the things that we found were a lot of people just enjoy knowing that there are bears in the state. And also the need for proactive management and education. So now we move on briefly to black bear management. So with this increasing bear population, DEC decided that it was necessary to form a bear team that was established in 2000. And what they identified as a better way to maybe manage this species, getting input from the public, and then weighing concerns about negative impacts like bear damage. And this is reassessed frequently for management decisions. They call this adaptive impact management. It really seeks to focus on impacts rather than just a population number. So the primary tool DEC uses to manage bear populations is hunting. You can see from this map, this shows what our objectives are for populations. In our area, at least west of the Hudson, we are seeking to reduce bear numbers, but for most of the state, we want to maintain current populations. To achieve this, hunting seasons have been lengthened and opened statewide to slow population expansion to areas where bird populations are less desirable. On the left, I believe that's from 2007. You can see that there's only open seasons in those three portions of the state, and now the entire state north of the city is open to bear hunting. So this is harvest density by wildlife management unit. Those are units the state's broken into that are similar habitat use and land cover, habitat and land use. So we can manage game populations within those units kind of independently. You can see that the southern portion of Sullivan County actually has the highest bear take in the state, closely followed by 3C, which is kind of the foothills of the Catskills west of 209. So we also collect a fair bit of information on bears, including their habits, age, weight, overall health, monitoring any potential diseases. A key concern of bear management is age structure of the population. So to age bears accurately, any bear we handle, we pull a small tooth. It's a premolar. It's removed and a thin section of tooth is stained and examined under a microscope. And this portion of the tooth has visible annuli that can be observed in the cementum. The cementum is basically what secures the tooth to the jawbone socket, and it grows continuously throughout the life of the animal. The oldest bear that we've ever aged by this method was a female from the Catskills that was 41 years old. So we've also partnered with universities and graduate students. This is pictures from a study that was done with Cornell. It was a marked recapture study where they're using barbed wire with large gaps in it so the bear could move through, but it'll leave a little bit of hair on it. And they could get DNA from the hair and, see if those bears had returned or if there were different bears. And they can use that to extrapolate to get a population estimate. There's just another picture from that study. Another research project DEC has partnered with Cornell to do is See Mammals. This basically seeks to collect data to help researchers and biologists study the distribution and size of black bear populations in New York. Basically helps us collect data over a much wider area than we could cover alone. Now, this is an app that individuals can download on their phone. Participation is open to everyone, and you can just enter if you see either, a bear, any other sort of wildlife, or sign, even personal trail camera information can be entered. So for the future of bear management in New York, we're going to continue to that adaptive impact management and seek that balance between bear-related impacts and the benefits of bears. Continue to seek stakeholder input to identify impacts. Really remains essential there. And we'd also like your input on any future management decisions. We'll talk about this later. But our bear plan is actually up for review in a couple years. And there's going to be a public comment period. So if you want to kind of keep an eye out for that and provide your thoughts, we always appreciate that. So now we're going to discuss bear-human interactions, which, as I mentioned before, I think this is what I really spend the vast majority of my time on. So bears are generally wary of people. It's unnatural for bears to be comfortable around people. What we want when you see a bear is, make some noise and it should run away. That's like what bears would normally do. That being said, bears can be attracted close to houses and dwellings because of those unnatural food attractants like bird feeders, pet food, grills, compost, and frequently poorly stored garbage. Unkept properties and irresponsible landowners can often unintentionally cause bears to, like I said, become habituated to those human food sources. And these bears can go from residence to resident, expecting to find the same food availability and, get themselves into trouble. This can often also cause a dangerous situation to an unknowing landowner who could startle a bear or, corner one or what have you. And those problems can persist and escalate as bears continue to find access to food resources near houses. When they build that association with houses and food, it's usually a matter of time before they keep pushing those boundaries until some real serious damage happens or an unsafe situation occurs. So bears that are intentionally fed by people will speed up that process and rapidly associate food sources and humans. These bears may begin approaching people in a non-aggressive manner with the expectation that they'll be rewarded with food. These bears' behavior often can't be curbed and are therefore, unfortunately, euthanized to prevent a public safety risk. A lot of times people think that they're doing the bear a favor by providing it food, but really it's at the detriment to the bear. There's an old saying, a fed bear is a dead bear, and that's usually what winds up happening. So we also deal with a lot of agricultural complaints and apiary damage. Backyard chickens is another big one. For these smaller ones, like apiaries or chickens, electric fence is really the best option. For larger properties, like I said, cornfields, and you see bears can really do a number on cornfields there. In the bottom left, they're actually trained bear dog handlers who can assist farmers by hazing those bears with dogs, running them out of the fields. And usually it takes quite a few attempts or hazing efforts. But a lot of times we can get those bears to start avoiding those areas. So we actually have the New York State's Black Bear Response Manual, which is a classification system of our more severe complaints or issues, which are class 1 through a class 4, which would be observing a bear doing its normal natural behavior. So as I mentioned, class 4 bears exhibiting normal natural behavior. Maybe you're driving, you saw one cross the road. You may have seen one, walk through the woods in your backyard, but didn't approach the house. But you just want to maybe call us and let us know that you did observe a bear. And this kind of thing where we do get a lot of these calls from people, and maybe they're concerned that they saw it or just want to let us know, and we do document it, but not necessarily necessary for us to know, especially if it's in an area that has healthy populations of bears. And we usually respond to this by providing education, technical advice, just an opportunity to kind of remind people about storing trash, what to do if you see a bear, that kind of stuff. So class 3 bears, and this is the vast majority of our bear complaints, are bears that have become habituated to human food sources. Again, those are most commonly bird feeders, improperly stored garbage, occasionally compost piles, barbecue grills that aren't cleaned properly or thoroughly, and also damage to fruit trees. In these cases, what we really try to tell people is the most effective thing is to remove those attractants, try to educate them, and sometimes we'll go out on site and look at the issue. But for the vast majority of those situations, like I said, securing that attractant is really the best thing. So class 2 bears, these are bears that clearly show undesirable behavior in the presence of humans. These bears show minimal fear in the presence of humans and are unresponsive to aversive conditioning techniques. So usually these bears, they've already kind of gone through that class 3 behavior. And usually we're not hearing about this. Somebody's allowing, say, a bear to gain access to trash or bird feeders, or maybe even intentionally feeding bears, but they become, conditioned that houses and people can mean food for them. In those situations, we try to be a little more aggressive when it comes to hazing. We can do things like paintball guns, rubber bullets, but we usually try to trap these bears and put tags in them if we do choose to re-release them, so we can track those individuals. So class 1 bears, those class 1 bears exhibit a clear threat to public safety, and usually this is home entry. Usually people aren't home, as they have been, but usually they smell food and try to break in through a window or unsecured door, causing significant property damage. So what's the best way to deal with a nuisance bear? As I said, usually it's to remove the food source. Garbage and bird feeders, like I said, are our 2 biggest issues. We really tell people if it's between, say, December 1st and March 15th, have a bird feeder up, but after that, take it down, because it really does just become a bear feeder. Garbage also should be secured in a shed or garage. Dumpsters, secured with metal lockable tops, not the plastic dumpsters. So whenever anybody has a bear frequenting their area, or I should say always, but frequently what they think is that they'll call us and they want us to come trap it. Now I won't say we never trapped and moved bears. Early efforts to manage bears involved quite a bit of trapping and relocating. But those efforts were really proven unsuccessful. Bears have an excellent homing ability. They'll readily return to the area. And if attractants remain at the residence, other bears are likely to find them anyways. We also deal with quite a few, or I shouldn't say quite a few, but each year a handful of urban occurrences. These are typically yearling bears that have just been kicked out by the sow. They don't have an established home range. They're not great at finding food yet. It usually starts with them kind of getting into garbage cans, moving through those backyards at night. And in the morning, they're in the middle of, say, Poughkeepsie, Newburgh, even down Pearl River, Middletown. We remove bears from almost any like larger city around here. In those situations, in those situations, a lot of times the people just want us to come and dart them, which usually we try, if we can keep that bear moving and get it to a piece of green space, that's the preferred option. There are a lot of challenges with chemical immobilization of bears. Like I said, we are equipped to do it. We do it a handful of times every year, but it's certainly not the first thing we go to. It's really the last. We need some trained staff that are available to respond. Response time often takes hours. We don't take lightly the fact that you're shooting a dart with chemical immobilizing agents up into the air in residential areas. A lot can go wrong there. Also, the bear can be harmed during either the dart placement or the fall from the tree. People also ask us to come out and trap bears a lot of times. This also isn't an easy fix. Traps are actually pretty dangerous. I don't like setting them really if like there's kids around or people can't keep pets secured. Large, heavy steel doors that when they fall down, if something is underneath it, cause severe injury or even death. And the reality is, again, if those attractants remain and there's other bears in the area, it's really just a matter of time before another bear starts doing the same thing. Again, back to that, what do you do with them after you trap them? A lot of people want us to take them someplace else, but either they continue that undesirable behavior for other people where we drop it off, or just returns to the same area. They really do have a pretty impressive sense of direction. So we do get asked pretty frequently as well, what do you do if you do encounter a bear? And that's either on your property or if you're hiking. So I always encourage people to give the bear as much space as possible and make sure there's an escape route available for the bear. The few instances where we have had like human contact, most of the time it's somebody unintentionally cornering a bear in an area and getting between it and its perceived escape route. If it's a spot where it shouldn't be, like say a backyard, deck, that kind of thing, noise is usually the most effective thing to get it to leave. I always recommend air horns. They work great. You just, minimum amount of effort. You just push the button, big startling noise. What you don't want to do is just kind of hit it and stand there or stick your arm out a window and kind of do it. That's fine to get it to move off the deck, but once we're out of the yard. But once it does, you actually kind of want to follow it a little bit and keep blowing that air horn and really kind of make it realize that's not a safe place for it to be. If you are ever approached by an aggressive bear, you want to make yourself look as big as possible, speak loudly and firmly. If you're with people, you want to all stay together. And though black bear attacks are exceedingly rare in eastern United States, if you're ever attacked, you want to fight back. It's not like a brown bear where they say you're supposed to play dead. Black bear attacks, if either have happened, are primarily predatory, not just defensive. So we talked about some of those conflict issues. Just kind of want to reiterate how we resolve those. So steps can be taken to minimize and avoid bear damage. It requires behavioral changes on the part of humans. That's most of the change that needs to happen, and the bears as well. Individual change is important, but only takes one messy neighbor to create a attractant for bears and a potential problem for the whole neighborhood. What we really try to work for is community level change. That's really the key to addressing these issues. If a food source is available at one person's house and maybe not another's, the bear's still going to go to their house looking for that handout or that easy meal. Like I said, that's the more time bears spend around people or close proximity to people, more of a risk something unfortunate or negative interaction is going to happen to that bear. Okay, sorry. So this is what we deal with a lot of the time when we talk to people. You know, when I say like go to these community meetings, maybe places that are having some bear issues, it seems like everybody's very interested in the problem being resolved, but they don't want to change what they do. We also get a lot of blaming. You know, the bear might be coming to their house and accessing their garbage, but they blame it on the fact that the neighbor has a bird feeder out. There's also always a lot of, you know, people suspecting that bears are being intentionally fed, or yeah, blaming it on, say, people who aren't as familiar with bears up for the weekend, say, who maybe might unintentionally leave some food out. So again, like, you know, we hear things like, you know, I can't afford electric fence. I always tell people if you have, like I said, backyard chickens, beehives, and or even like small animals, livestock, goats, sheep, the investment of an electric fence is really going to pay for itself pretty quick. Systems have come down in price a lot. For about $100, you can set up a pretty effective system, and that's a permanent solution. The trash issue, the best thing to do is secure it in a garage or a shed, someplace where the bear can't see it and can't smell it. You can put ammonia-soaked rag in with the trash. Now, if the can is still out and the bear knows there's, you know, food in it, the ammonia is not going to do anything. It's already built that visual association. But it does help mask the smell of the trash. So if you can place it, like I said, a shed or a garage, and then put ammonia in there, either sprinkle it or soak a rag and toss it in there, that's a pretty effective method. Again, you know, the trash, a lot of people say, oh, the trash comes so early. You know, I can't put it out like the day of. The reality is you have to do something, or else the problem is just going to persist. And, you know, it's usually, like I said, in those situations, the bear that takes the worst of it. So these are some additional resources. If people are interested in kind of learning more about bears, that upper left corner, that's our bear management plan, and that kind of provides an overview for 10 years of how the DEC will and does manage bears, what our goals are. And if you're interested in, like I said, bear populations in New York, that's a great resource. We also have things like a how-to for people who are interested in hunting bears but haven't before. There's bears in a lot of areas that weren't traditionally, so there's not a lot of people who might be interested in pursuing them but have never before. So that's a good resource if you want to read that. And in the middle there, it's a DVD that's available at most public libraries in New York. And it's and schools. It's about like how to address nuisance bear issues. So you can always go and pick up that if you'd like. We also have copies here at the office. So this is my contact information. If you have additional questions after this, you can always feel free to give me a call, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. So I guess you ran a little bit quicker than I thought there, Lauren. And
that's okay. That's okay. There's some good questions.
Because we had the screen share up, I couldn't really see the questions while I was doing that. So hopefully
that's okay. Yeah, there's a few questions. Yeah. I know you've already answered this one about how many bears do we have in our area, and I know that you did talk about that one. But if you would like to just answer that one again. So like I said,
I think the minimum population estimate was about 2,600. I usually tell people 3,000. That's probably a little more accurate and round number. Like I said, we're not sure exactly. They don't put their hands up to be counted or anything. But yeah, 6,000 to 8,000 for the state.
Okay. Yeah. And then a question from Peter is, are we looking into how to protect the bear as humans continue to encroach on open spaces? And I know that's part of what you were talking about too, that bear management plans are coming up. So input from people is always good, but if you'd like to speak more on protecting the bears.
Yeah, so I'll be honest, like bear populations in much of the state where there's good habitat, they don't need any special protections. They're doing really well. Like I said, in fact, we're looking at like curbing population growth in most of the state, or like maintaining current populations in most of the state, and actually reducing it in the southeast. That being said, like bears are protected as a game animal in New York State. There's bag limits, season structure. So yeah, they have some inherent protections there under the law and the ECL conservation law. But yeah, like unlike a lot of species, like I said, there's a lot more habitat than there used to be as those kind of farms became forested. But they're doing really well. We just need to keep them away from people and educate people to put their food away.
Yeah, and as a follow-up, as you were talking, I was interested when I was looking at the maps of where there are a lot of bears, and there's a nice concentration here in the Catskills and the Hudson Valley, and the population isn't as big up in the Adirondacks and maybe down in the southern tier in Allegheny. Is it really just because there's just a lot more people and that they have more access to what they need?
So I think what you're referring to is that harvest map. Is it the harvest density map?
Yeah.
So that's not necessarily what the actual population is. That's how many bears are taken. And down here we do have a high bear population, but we also have more like access to huntable lands. In the Adirondacks, there's a lot of public lands, but people aren't going to hike in 10 miles from a road. Down here we do have those road systems that allow people access to those bears. So we probably do have similar or higher densities for bear populations, but there's also just a lot more being harvested here because we have more people hunting.
Higher hunting. That makes sense.
Yeah.
That totally makes sense. So this also is a good question, as the bears are going to be coming back out into the woods. We were talking about this earlier today. It's about mid-March is when you want to start taking down your bird feeders and just becoming more bear aware. So one of them is about hiking. A lot of people love to hike around here. So are there specific times of year when you're going to encounter more bears on the trail? You're more likely to encounter them. And if you do, should you go back the way you came, or can you proceed after the bear has left the immediate area? Do you have any recommendations for that?
Yeah, sure. So the best time to see a bear is really during that June, July mating season. You have male bears traveling long distances in search of females. You also have the dispersal of those younger yearling bears, and those are the ones that are usually pretty observable. Because they're honestly just not that smart yet. They're kind of looking for food. They don't have, like I said, an established home range. They're just traveling, getting a lot of times beat up by larger bears. So they're just doing a lot of moving, a lot of daylight activity. So those are the ones you see a lot of times. Like I said, so June's the best time to really see a bear. But you're not really going to go out there and just see a bear. They still exist at a lot lower densities than, say, deer or a lot of other animals. But that's the best time of year. Now, if you were in hiking and you did encounter a bear, depends what the bear is doing. If it's just walking along, heading in a safe direction away from you, I encourage people, take a picture and enjoy that moment. It's really cool to see a bear just in the wild doing its own thing. If the bear is walking towards you and perhaps doesn't see you, which happens too, you just want to make that bear aware of your presence and that you're a person. So you want to just very clearly say something like, hey bear, clap your hands, wave your arms, look kind of big. You don't want to growl or sound like an animal. Some people you hear make weird noises thinking that's going to frighten them. You don't want that bear to think you're an animal. You want to let it know you're a person and something to be afraid of. Again, if you're in a group, you want to stay together. But yeah, just usually, like I said, if a bear sees you or begins to approach you, because there are situations where a bear may have gotten food from somebody before and it's curious, wants to see if you're giving it some food too. So you just want to be big and scary and yell at it. That's really the best thing.
Yeah, I'm thinking too, if you see a bear with cubs, I think that's also a situation which you might treat a little differently than a single bear on their own, right? If there's a bear with cubs, maybe you should go back the way you came, because mama bear can be kind of aggressive, right?
Well, like I said, I think you should always, if you can avoid any contact with that animal, you should, right? But if, like I said, that bear is walking towards you, doesn't see you, or begins to approach, that's when you make noise. So I do the same thing if it was a sow with a cub versus an individual lone bear. A lot of the, sows being very protective of their cubs comes from brown bears. Black bears are much, much more likely to, like I said, put those cubs up a tree and run off herself. I don't know, in nuisance situations, I've approached a lot of sows with cubs, and I'm always in bears in general, and I'm always amazed that, even though they are a lot bigger and stronger than you, they almost always choose to get away from you and put as much distance between you and them as possible. They very rarely act aggressively. That being said, if, say, she did put her cubs up a tree and run off, I'd leave that area. You don't want to stay around. You don't want to approach that tree, because that might be seen as you trying to go after those cubs. In that situation, back off or loop around or something. But you want to give them a lot of space as much as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good advice. And then someone on the same track here, someone here has a question about bear bells. Are bear bells effective?
Yeah, they can be. So those are typically more used around brown bears, like I said, which can be aggressive. I work in Alaska, we use those quite a bit. If people want to, they certainly can. But they aren't as popular here because, like I said, black bears really aren't that aggressive, or those kind of defensive charges that brown bears are more prone to. Black bears don't typically do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I used to live in Montana, and when I went hiking, I had a bear bell.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, yeah, because it made sense too. And I actually don't know what happened to my bear bell, where that went.
But yeah, that being said, like if people feel like it makes them feel more comfortable enjoying the outdoors, go for it.
Yeah. It can't hurt, right?
Right, sure.
Yeah. And this is also a really good one. Your contact information. Could you put that up again for our audience so that we can
sure,
if you wanted to write that down real quick.
Yeah. And also just say briefly that if you do have like questions about a bear issue, or just a general wildlife question, we have our general wildlife line. And it's always manned regular business hours by a technician or a wildlife biologist who can answer your questions. And that number, I'll just tell you, I meant to put it up there. It's 845-256-3098. Again, that's 845-256-3098. Like I said, that's our general wildlife question line. But I'll throw back. I'm sorry. I already actually closed the presentation, but I'll certainly give you my phone number. It's again 845-256-3090. And my email is just Jonathan, JONATHAN .Russell, RUSSELL @DEC.NY.gov. Oh, thanks for putting that in the chat.
Yeah. Yeah, it's my pleasure. It's pretty easy to do there. So yeah, and I'm happy to field any other questions.
Yeah, and also I'm always interested to hear maybe of like what kind of bear encounters or issues other people have had, and maybe how they resolved them or didn't resolve them. Anybody's got any good bear stories?
Well, yeah, I actually have a rather embarrassing bear story, mostly because I know better. I should know better. When I first moved here 2 years ago, moved here from Minnesota. I'm originally from New York, but in Minnesota, in the Twin Cities area, not a lot of bears. There are some, but we didn't have them in our yard. And we did the faux pas of putting our garbage out too soon. And yeah, all of a sudden, you're watching a movie and you look out the window and you go, there's a bear in my garbage at the end of the driveway, and the garbage is everywhere. And yeah, I was like, oh, should have known better, right? Like,
right.
Yeah, just
did. Out of curiosity, would you do differently in the future, or did you have to, or?
Yeah, so what we do now is we certainly do not put our garbage out before garbage day. And this time of year, we're a little more casual. We'll put the garbage out at night. But there were times that I would get up pretty early in the morning and I'd run that down. Sometimes we take our chances, but there are certain times of the year, and it's coming up as the bears are going to be becoming more frequent in our neighborhood. I live in a pretty rural neighborhood. So there are times when our neighbors are not as cautious as we are. So the bears we kind of become a known area.
Right.
So if we see that other people have been hit, their garbage has been hit, then we also we take note of that, and we're like, okay, it's time to do the early morning wake up and run.
Right, sure.
Yeah. And I see there's a question about hiking with a dog. Could the bear be aggressive to the dog? And I have a dog, and we have a screened in porch here, and there were 2 bears in our backyard. And when she saw them, she barked, and the bears ran. I don't know if that's a little different than when you're hiking on a trail and, she was in an enclosed space, but maybe you can speak on that a little bit.
I'm sorry. Can you just? I was reading the chat for a moment there.
Oh, yeah. So dogs
and
and bears. Would a bear could a bear become
Yeah.
aggressive to the dog if you're hiking with them?
The vast majority of instances where like dogs are harmed by bears, it's the bear or the dog approaching the bear and being aggressive towards the bear. And the bear basically turning around and whacking it. And unfortunately, a swipe from a bear, it can kill a dog pretty easily. And it goes back to a lot of these situations again. Start with a bear coming into trash. Somebody opens their door at night, not knowing the bear is on the property or accessing the garbage can. Dog takes off, smells the bear, goes after it. And like I said, that's when something bad happens. So it kind of all goes back to, again, I had something a broken record, but really securing those attractants. If those aren't available, the bear won't have any reason to be there. If you're hiking, obviously you want that dog, even if it's off leash, under your control, like be able to call that dog back if you let it off the leash. Like some people even will use like electric collars in case they do chase a bear. They can kind of stop them from that. But if a dog goes after a bear and is aggressive, bears will defend themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes sense. And it's just, it's always a good idea because you're never sure, even a well-trained dog, you're never sure what they're going to do when they spot something like a bear. So having them on leash when you're hiking is a good idea. So I'll also mention another great resource is bearwise.org. And I can put that in the chat. Sure, yeah.
So that's actually, like, I'll say we have a lot of good information on our website, but it's not the easiest to navigate if anybody has looking for some specific information. Bearwise.org is it was formed by a group of states in the Southeast, and now it's kind of becoming more national. New York's going to join that effort as well. But it's like quality information by biologists. They have a store where you can like either print off for free information like bear education games for kids. You sign up on their mailing list, and every month they'll send you an email about like what bears are doing this month, this time of year. Do-it-yourself plans for securing garbage cans and dumpsters from bears. Places to order bear-resistant, garbage cans, so they're prefabricated. It's a really good website with quality information. And like I said, it's really easy to navigate. So I like it a lot.
Nice. Yeah. We do have someone, let's see here, Peter. I'm going to allow Peter to join us for a moment here. There's also a lot of questions in the chat from people about interactions with other animals, like would a bear attack a fawn or an other small animal? And what about coyotes and bears? So like I said, the bulk of bears' diet is vegetation, but if they have something like an animal that or a live prey that they can catch, they will. They're opportunistic. And some bears will really focus on fawns in June. They'll actually search for them. But they'll certainly eat an animal they can catch, fawns specifically. That the amount of fawns they eat doesn't really, isn't enough to really be an impact on our deer population. But it certainly is a food source that they'll go after. All right, here's Peter. Peter, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Not really a question. You had can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
You had asked about sharing bear encounter experiences, but I also thought that my experience would also answer. I saw the question about taking dogs on hikes. And back when I first adopted my dog, I took him on his first ever hike through the backcountry. I was on Stokes Trail up at the preserve. I'm the backcountry patrol coordinator, by the way, so I'm up there quite often. And I was coming along Stokes Trail, and I thought I saw two dogs off the leash. So I was preparing to find the owner and ask them to please leash up, and then quickly realized as they came to the trail that it was two cubs. And I kind of panicked because I was thinking, where's Mama? And as fast as the thought popped into my head, Mama was there on the trail and stood. And I'll tell you what, I was really nervous. I was shaking a bit. But my dog started to bark. I tried to calm him. And in that short amount of time, I looked up. She realized her cubs had moved on. She was gone. The encounter was over in seconds. It was both got the heart pumping, but it was pretty thrilling as well. So I started to pay a little more attention and try to research and study a little more about how to handle these things, and heard a lot of what I heard tonight as well. But back then, a lot of the information that was out there really kind of mixed the information between black bear and brown bear. And they really are two very different animals. This was, I've since had a couple of other encounters, brief, all of them. And the last one, I actually was with Ranger Dan, and we saw some folks on Pine Road, and they treed a bear and all started to gather around the tree with their cameras. And I had to go over and ask them, listen, get out of here. You don't know where Mama is. They went up the tree for safety, and now you're crowding around them. So humans are the problem, not the bears.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's all. Just wanted to share that.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Peter. Yeah. There's a lot of instances of people encountering bears. You know, Kathy here says hiking along Jenny Lane with the dog, and I just saw a big back end of a bear crossing the trail where he'd just been. I mean, it's quite frequent. But speaking of hiking, there's also a question about safety of solo hiking in the Catskills. I do solo hiking in the Catskills, and I don't think you should avoid it, which is part of the question here. And the other part is it just fine as long as you're aware of your surroundings and maybe carry bear spray? I know I make sure I'm aware of my surroundings. I don't have bear spray, but. Right.
Yeah, I wouldn't I do solo hiking myself in the Catskills. I've never had an issue. Like I said, if you want to carry bear spray, or I think an air horn is even more effective in a lot of those situations. Since you brought up bear spray, a lot of people don't realize that if you do use bear spray, just know that you're probably going to get a dose of it too. That aerosolizes, it goes everywhere. Depending on which way the wind's blowing, you're probably going to get hit too. So if you use it, make sure you need to use it, because it's pretty uncomfortable.
It is, yeah. And if the wind, shifts suddenly while you've just sprayed it, it's uncomfortable. And as you mentioned, brown bears are much more aggressive. And if you were hiking in the West, in the Rockies, Alaska, and there are brown bears there, because they are more aggressive, I'd say bear spray is a good idea. But black bears are not as aggressive, as you said, and really making the loud noises. So an air horn, if you're really concerned, is a lot more effective.
And like I said, if somebody feels more comfortable or enjoys being outside more, knowing that they have that with them, I think it's a really great idea to bring it. Kind of whatever helps you enjoy your time outside more. And it's not that difficult, or not much of an issue for you to carry it. They sell little holsters that fit on your belt, or you can strap them to your bag. So whatever gets people out there.
Yeah, and definitely enjoy those solo hikes, because I find such great just meditation in the solitude out in the woods, and I enjoy them.
I did also want to mention Peter, when he was telling his story, he said about how that sow stood up. I was going to mention, like a lot of people interpret that as like aggressive behavior, and it's really not. It's just a bear trying to see better, get a little more height. Not typical aggressive behavior at all. what is like aggressive behavior for bear is they'll start huffing, kind of like jumping up with their front paws and stomping on the ground, clacking their teeth, that kind of stuff. But you get a lot of people who are all freaked out because a bear stood on its back legs, and looked at them from like 50 yards or something. And that's just them trying to say, what is that thing?
Yeah. Much like we would, we'd probably go, what's that? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. You're absolutely right there. If they do start, stomping their feet or they start making noise themselves, then that's definitely a sign that you should go.
Right.
Yeah. Could be some aggressive things happening there. There's something going on. You've invaded their space. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I haven't seen any new questions coming through. Is there anything else that you would like to add about this? I mean, I'm sure you could talk about bears forever.
Sure, yeah. No, I appreciate you inviting me. Most of the time when I'm talking to someone about bears, it's after they've already had an issue. And it's nice to be a little more proactive, and I feel like that's something we're trying to be better at, but the reality is, once those bears are out, we're mostly just running around trying to put out fires and address individual situations. But yeah, the more we can get the word out on, like I said, kind of keeping that garbage put away, taking those bird feeders down, the better. And if people can kind of help out with that and just, I don't know if they feel comfortable, if they know somebody who has, a bear issue, kind of provide that guidance, tell them like, well, can you put your garbage in a shed or something? Or you see someone with the bird feeder up, birds don't really need that additional feed this time of year. They're doing just fine. For the benefit of the bears, like maybe you can put that away. That being said, people really love feeding birds. It's really difficult to convince some people to put those bird feeders away, even though the bear's coming every night and ripping it down. Or they bring it inside at night because they think, that's okay because it's not wrecking the bird feeder. But the reality is, like, that bear still smells that bird seed, and a lot of seed gets spilled in the ground underneath bird feeders. So the bear's still going to keep coming, and it's still building that association with people, houses, and it's probably going to, like I said, if you don't mind, go to other houses and do the same thing. And I don't know, like I said, like the more interactions bear has with people, the higher chance that something bad's going to happen for that animal.
Yeah, and we certainly don't want that. We do want to keep our bear population healthy, and we don't want to have to exterminate a bear for really just carelessness on our part. But
I'll say every year we euthanize a handful of bears for like things like home break-ins are most frequent, and it's like obviously my least favorite part of the job. That this bear didn't one day just break into a house. This was a long process of people leaving out food for bears, like I said, intentionally or unintentionally, and it's unfortunate when it progresses to that level.
Yeah, it is. But you have provided a lot of great resources. Of course, the DEC website, as you mentioned, has a lot of information on there, and bearwise.org. And of course, you gave out your contact information. So if people do have further questions, they can contact you. And then the wildlife line as well, just for general questions on bears and other wildlife. So yeah, all of that's really great. Great information. And of course, it's a good time of year to have all these reminders about bears. I know there's still snow on the ground and everything, but it's soon enough. It's going to be time for more bear encounters.
Yeah, no, I'd say in about 2 weeks is when we start getting our first complaints rolling in pretty steady, and build right into April. Yep.
Yep. Yeah. And I was telling you earlier today that I have a trail camera in my yard. And last year, I think it was like March 29th or March 30th, our trail cam caught the bear coming through the yard. And we're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yep. So it's the time is coming for them to be more active and us to be more aware and just more proactive and educating our neighbors too, if we see anything like that.
Right. Yeah. No, I always appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to thank you so much for this presentation tonight. I really
Yeah, thank
appreciate
you,
you doing
Lauren.
this.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate the opportunity, and thanks to everybody who tuned in.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. And again, this is recorded, so some of you might be watching this at a later date. And those of you who did join us live, maybe you wanted to just watch it again. You might have a refresher on some of that information. So they're going to be there for you. I'll have the link for everybody in a little while. Probably not today, but in a little while. Yeah. Well, thank you, everyone, so much. Thank you, Jonathan. I really appreciate this. So.
Yeah. Thanks.
Have a great rest of your evening, everybody.
You too.